The morning I realized something had shifted, I was standing in my daughter-in-law's kitchen at 6 a.m., still in my robe, making pancakes for everyone, because no one had asked me to, but no one had offered to either. My hands moved automatically, measuring flour, cracking eggs, while the rest of the house slept. That was the thing about being invisible. You still had to show up. My name is Dorothy. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years teaching 4th grade in Dayton, Ohio. I know how to read a room. I know when a child feels unseen. I spent my whole career making sure no child in my classroom ever felt that way. It took me 4 months living under my son's roof to understand I had forgotten how to do that for myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. It always does. My husband Frank passed away 2 years ago November. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, that's how fast it went. One afternoon he was complaining about back pain. And then one Tuesday morning, I was standing in a funeral home in a gray dress I'd never worn before, shaking hands with people I barely recognized. 41 years of marriage, gone in 11 weeks. For a long time after, I did fine. That sounds strange, but it's true. Grief is strange that way. It doesn't always hit you immediately. I went through the motions. I answered sympathy cards. I donated his clothes. I kept the house on Birchwood Lane exactly as it was because changing it felt like erasing him, and I wasn't ready for that. My son called every Sunday. My daughter-in-law, she was polite on the phone. Brief, but polite. Then winter came, and the house, which had always felt like a home, began to feel like a storage unit for memories I couldn't quite touch. It was my son who suggested it. We were on the phone in January, a Sunday, like always. And he said, "Mom, we have the spare room. The kids would love having you close. Just come for a few months, try it." I want to be honest here, I hesitated. Not because I didn't love my son. I did. I do. But I had a feeling, not a sharp one, more like a low hum, the kind you notice only after it's been going on for a while. I'd seen how my daughter-in-law kept her house, controlled, orderly, a place for everything. And I knew, somewhere beneath all the grief and loneliness, that there might not be a place for me. But I was 67 years old, and I had just spent 3 months eating dinner alone on a couch, watching the news and falling asleep with the TV still on. So I said yes. I packed 2 suitcases and a box of books and drove 4 hours to their house in Crestwood, the suburb outside Nashville where my son had lived for the past 9 years. The house was beautiful. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard, a kitchen with an island that my daughter-in-law had clearly curated, like a magazine spread. Everything white and pale wood and matching. My son hugged me at the door. "We're so glad you're here, Mom," he said, and I believed him. I still believe he meant it. My daughter-in-law smiled. It was the kind of smile that reaches exactly as far as the muscles require and no further. "We made up the room for you," she said. "There are fresh towels on the bed." The room was nice. Small, but nice. It had a window that looked out at the neighbor's fence. That first week, I tried hard. I cooked dinner twice. Pot roast the first time, chicken soup the second. And my grandchildren ate enthusiastically, and my son said, "Mom, this is incredible." And I felt, briefly, like I had found my footing. My daughter-in-law ate quietly and then said she'd been trying to keep the family on a lower sodium diet. I bought low sodium everything after that. The second week, I started noticing the rhythms of the house. My daughter-in-law left at 7:45 for her job at a real estate office. My son left at 8. The kids, my grandson who was 9, my granddaughter who was 6, left at 8:20 for school. And then the house was mine. Except it wasn't mine. It was hers. I learned this the first time I rearranged the dishwasher. I thought I was helping. She came home, opened it, and closed it again without a word. Then she opened it again and rearranged it back the way it had been. She didn't look at me while she did it. I told myself it didn't matter. The third week, I picked up the kids from school. It hadn't been asked of me. My daughter-in-law's mother usually did it, but she had a doctor's appointment and my daughter-in-law had mentioned it casually over breakfast. The way people mention something when they expect it to be handled. "My mom can't get them today," she said and went back to her phone. "I got them. Of course I got them. They were my grandchildren. I made them snacks when we got home. My granddaughter told me about a project she was working on about butterflies. My grandson showed me a bruise on his knee from recess. I sat at the kitchen table with them for an hour and felt more like myself than I had since Frank died. When my daughter-in-law came home, she walked in, saw the snack dishes in the sink, and asked the kids if they'd done their homework yet. They hadn't. We'd been talking about butterflies." She glanced at me. "We like to get homework done right away," she said. "Before anything else." She said we, but she meant I. I understood. "I didn't know," I said. "I'll make sure next time." She nodded and went upstairs. My son came home at 6:30. He asked how everyone's day was. I said fine. He kissed the kids. He kissed his wife. He looked at me and said, "You okay, Mom?" And I said yes, and I was, or I was trying to be. But something was already settling in. A weight, not dramatic, not sudden, just a slow compression, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. The weeks that followed moved in a pattern I didn't recognize until I was too deep inside it. I cooked, quietly, careful about sodium, careful about the kitchen rules I was learning without being told them. I cleaned up after myself meticulously, more carefully than I'd cleaned my own house in 30 years of living in it. I picked up the grandchildren. I helped with homework, math, spelling, a science fair project about volcanoes. I read to my granddaughter every night she asked me to. And at dinner, I sat at the far end of the table and I listened to my son and my daughter-in-law talk about their days, their plans, their friends, their schedules, and I contributed when I was asked and fell quiet when I wasn't. I was a guest who had become a fixture, and fixtures don't have opinions. Fixtures don't have preferences. Fixtures are just there. One night in March, my son mentioned that his in-laws were coming to visit. My daughter-in-law's parents from Phoenix. "Just for the weekend," he said. "That's lovely," I said. "I'll stay out of the way." There was a pause. My daughter-in-law looked at my son. My son looked at his plate. "Actually, Mom," he said slowly, "we were thinking it might be easier if you stayed at the Marriott for those 2 nights, just so everyone has space." I want to tell you that I said something. I want to tell you that I looked my son in the eye and said, "I drove 4 hours to be here. I cook and clean and care for your children, and I am being asked to sleep at the Marriott so that other grandparents can have my room." I didn't say any of that. "Of course," I said. "I'll book a room." I went to my bedroom, the small room with the window facing the neighbor's fence, and I sat on the edge of the bed and I pressed my hands flat on my thighs and I breathed. I paid for the Marriott myself, 2 nights. I sat in that hotel room on a Saturday afternoon watching HGTV and eating machine crackers, and something cracked open in me, very quietly, like a window latch giving way. I thought about Frank, about our house on Birchwood Lane, which was still there, still mine, still holding 31 years of a life I had actually lived. I thought about my classroom, 23 kids a year for 3 decades, every one of them knowing I saw them, every one of them knowing that when they walked in my door, they were worth something. When had I forgotten how to insist on that for myself? When I came back from the Marriott on Sunday evening, my daughter-in-law's parents were still there, laughing in the kitchen. They were warm people. They shook my hand. They said it was nice to meet me. My son introduced me as my mom, Dorothy. She's been staying with us for a while. Staying with us for a while. Like I was an extended house guest. Like I was a temporary inconvenience between now and whenever I found somewhere else to be. I smiled. I said it was nice to meet them. I took my suitcase back to my room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark with the window cracked, listening to the neighbor's dog bark intermittently, and I made a list in my head, not of grievances. I wasn't ready to call them that yet. Just facts. I had been here 4 months. I had cooked more than 60 meals. I had picked up the grandchildren 40-something times. I had helped with homework, attended a school play, fixed a broken shelf in the garage because I saw it needed fixing and no one else had noticed. I had rearranged my entire sense of myself to fit the shape of this household, and I had been asked to leave my room for other guests. The next morning, I got up at 6 and started making pancakes again, and I stood there at the stove and I thought, why am I doing this? Not bitterly, genuinely. Why am I doing this? And the honest answer was because I thought it would make me matter here. Because I thought if I was useful enough, needed enough, present enough, they would see me. Actually see me. The way I was still Dorothy, the woman who had buffed Frank for 41 years, who had shaped hundreds of children, who had a voice and opinions and a self. Not just a body in a spare room who remembered to buy low-sodium broth. The pancakes burned a little on one side. I served them anyway. No one noticed. The week before Easter, my daughter-in-law announced that her sister's family was coming to stay for the holiday. 6 people total. Her sister, her brother-in-law, 3 kids, and a dog. We're going to need to rearrange the rooms a bit, she said, not looking up from her laptop. I waited. Mom, my son said, would you mind bunking with the kids? Just for 5 days, we put an air mattress in Lily's room. I was 67 years old. I had arthritis in my left hip. I had driven 4 hours to come here. An air mattress, I said. It's really comfortable, my daughter-in-law said. We use it camping. I looked at my son. My son looked at the table. And for the first time, something in me shifted from quiet hurt to something else. Not anger, closer to clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you've been squinting at something blurry for a long time and your eyes finally adjust. I don't think I'm able to do the air mattress, I said. My hip. We could get you a topper, my daughter-in-law said. I think, I said carefully, I'm going to look into my own place. Silence. My son looked up. Mom, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, I said. I want to. That was the first true thing I had said out loud in 4 months. I called my friend Carol that afternoon. We'd been friends since our kids were in elementary school together, 30-some years. Carol lived 40 minutes from Crestwood, in a little town called Millbrook, in a house she'd lived in alone since her own divorce 12 years back. I need to find a place, I told her, an apartment or a small rental. Something month to month to start. Carol didn't ask questions. That's why she's been my friend for 30 years. She said, I'll look around. Give me a couple of days. I didn't tell my son I'd called her. I didn't tell my daughter-in-law. I went about the week quietly. Made dinners, picked up the grandchildren, helped with homework. But something had changed inside me that couldn't be unchanged. I had told the truth. To myself, then out loud, and the relief of it was like setting down something I hadn't realized I was carrying. On Thursday, Carol called back. She had found a 1-bedroom apartment in Millbrook, above a bookstore, available the first of the month, $800 a month, hardwood floors, a little balcony, a view of the town square. I said I'd take it. I told my son that Friday evening. His wife had taken the kids to a birthday party. It was just the 2 of us in the kitchen, which almost never happened, and I was grateful for that. I found an apartment, I said, in Millbrook. I'm going to move the first of the month. He looked at me with an expression I can only describe as relief trying to disguise itself as concern. Mom, are you sure? You don't have to. I know I don't have to, I said again, gently this time. But I want to, sweetheart. I need my own space. I think we both know that. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, did something happen? Did she say something? I thought about the Marriott, the dishwasher. She's been staying with us for a while. The air mattress. Nothing happened, I said. I'm just ready. He nodded. He reached over and squeezed my hand, and I saw it on his face then, just briefly, the flicker of a boy who loved his mother and a man who had made choices he couldn't entirely undo, and the complicated space between those two things. "I'll help you move," he said. "I know you will," I said. My daughter-in-law came home with the kids an hour later. My son told her. She nodded. She said, "That sounds nice," in the same voice she used when the kids told her about a dream they'd had. I spent the evening packing my boxes. Moving day was a Saturday, a cool morning in early April. My son loaded my books into his car. Carol came with her truck. My grandchildren stood in the driveway, and my granddaughter Lily cried a little, real tears, not performed ones, and grabbed my hand and said, "Grandma, I don't want you to go." I crouched down to her level, even though my hip made me wince, and I looked her straight in the face. "I'm 40 minutes away," I said. "That is not far at all. And I have a balcony, and I'm going to get a little bistro table, and whenever you want to come visit, we'll have cocoa out there, and I will tell you everything I know about butterflies." She laughed, a little watery. She hugged me around the neck. My grandson gave me a high five, which was his way of saying everything he didn't have words for yet. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway. She lifted her hand in a kind of wave. I waved back. And that was that. The apartment above the bookstore was everything Carol described. Hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly in the mornings, a clawfoot tub, a kitchen that was entirely mine, where I could put things wherever I wanted, and no one would rearrange them. A balcony the size of a generous closet, with enough room for 2 chairs and a small table and a pot of geraniums I bought at the farmer's market my second weekend there. I cannot tell you it wasn't lonely at first. It was. I'd wake up at 6 out of habit, that old reflex of needing to be useful before anyone else was awake, and for a moment I'd feel the absence of a household to tend to. I'd feel Frank's absence, which never entirely went away. But then I'd make my own coffee, exactly as strong as I liked it, and carry it out to the balcony and watch the town square come awake. The man who opened the bakery, the woman who walked her terrier at the same time every morning, the gradual filling up of a world I was starting to feel part of again. I found a book club at the library. I started swimming at the community pool on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I had dinner with Carol every other Friday. I drove to Crestwood every other weekend and took the grandchildren for the afternoon, not to babysit, not to be useful, but just to be with them, which turned out to be a different thing entirely. My son called more than he used to. Our Sunday calls were longer. Once, after the kids were in bed, he called on a Wednesday night just to talk, and I understood that in some ways the distance had made room for something that the closeness hadn't allowed. He never said anything directly about those 4 months. Neither did I. Some things don't need to be said to be understood. About 6 weeks after I moved out, I got a text from my daughter-in-law. This was unusual enough that I read it 3 times. "The kids miss you. Would you want to come for dinner Saturday?" I sat with the message for a long time. I thought about the Marriott, the dishwasher, the air mattress, the smile that traveled exactly as far as the muscles required. I thought about all the mornings I'd made pancakes, no one asked for, and the long evenings at the end of the table. Then I thought about Lily's face when she cried in the driveway. I texted back, "I'd love that. I'll bring dessert." I brought an apple pie. It sat right in the middle of the table and everyone had seconds and nobody said a word about sodium. It was a small thing, but it was mine. I want to say something to anyone listening who might be in the middle of what I was in the middle of, who might be making pancakes. Nobody asked for at 6 in the morning in a house that doesn't feel like home. I'm not going to tell you to leave immediately or that your family doesn't love you. Mine did, mine does. Love and mistreatment are not always opposites. Sometimes they exist in the same house, in the same people, at the same time. That's the hardest thing to hold. But I will tell you this. The morning I told the truth, when I said I don't think I'm able to do the air mattress, was the morning everything started to change. Not because of what I said, because of what I finally admitted to myself before I said it, that I was still Dorothy, that Dorothy was still worth something. that the woman who had spent 31 years making sure every child in her classroom felt seen was allowed, more than allowed, was obligated to insist on being seen herself. A room above a bookstore with a balcony view of a town square is not a consolation prize. It is a life. It is my life. And I carry it like it's light.